Good morning, this is the Paradise Unicorn Priestess bringing you day 37 of A Course in Miracles, the Yin translation where we use female words. This would be February 6th if you are starting at the new year. The ego's use of guilt. Perhaps some of our concepts will become clearer and more personally meaningful if the ego's use of guilt is clarified. The ego has a purpose, just as the Holy Spirit has. The ego's purpose is fear, because only the fearful can be egotistic. The ego's logic is as impeccable as that of the Holy Spirit, because your mind has the means at its disposal to side with heaven or earth as it elects. But again, remember that both are in you. In heaven, there is no guilt, because the realm is attained through the atonement which releases you to create. The word create is appropriate here because once what you have made is undone by the Holy Spirit, the blessed residue is restored and therefore continues in creation. What is truly blessed is incapable of giving rise to guilt and must give rise to joy. This makes it invulnerable to the ego because its peace is unassailable. It is invulnerable to disruption because it is whole. Guilt is always disruptive. Anything that engenders fear is divisive because it obeys the law of division. If the ego is the symbol of separation, it is also the symbol of guilt. Guilt is more than merely not of God. It is the symbol of attack on God. This is a totally meaningless concept except to the ego. But do not underestimate the power of the ego's belief in it. This is the belief from which all guilt really stems. The ego is the part of the mind that believes in division. How could part of God detach itself without believing it is attacking her? We spoke before of the authority problem as based on the concept of usurping God's power. The ego believes that this is what you did because it believes that it is you. If you identify with the ego, you must perceive yourself as guilty. Whenever you respond to your ego, you will experience guilt, and you will fear punishment. The ego is quite literally a fearful thought. However ridiculous the idea of attacking God may be to the sane mind, never forget that the ego is not sane. It represents a delusional system and speaks for it. Listening to the ego's voice means that you believe it is possible to attack God, and that a part of her has been torn away by you. Fear of retaliation from without follows because the severity of the guilt is so acute that it must be projected. Whatever you accept into your mind has reality for you. It is your acceptance of it that makes it real. If you enthrone the ego in your mind, your allowing it to enter makes it your reality. This is because the mind is capable of creating reality or making illusions. I said before that you must learn to think with God. To think with her is to think like her. This engenders joy, not guilt, because it is natural. Guilt is a sure sign that your thinking is unnatural. Unnatural thinking will always be attended with guilt, because it is the belief in sin. The ego does not perceive sin as a lack of love, but as a positive act of assault. This is necessary to the ego's survival, because as soon as you regard sin as a lack, you will automatically attempt to remedy the situation, and you will succeed. The ego regards this as doom, but you must learn to regard it as freedom. The guiltless mind cannot suffer. Being sane, the mind heals the body because it has been healed. The sane mind cannot conceive of illness because it cannot conceive of attacking anyone or anything. I said before that illness is a form of magic. It might be better to say that it is a form of magical solution. The ego believes that by punishing itself, it will mitigate the punishment of God. Yet even in this it is arrogant. It attributes to God a punishing intent, and then takes this intent as its own prerogative. It tries to usurp all the functions of God as it perceives them, because it recognizes that only total allegiance can be trusted. The ego cannot oppose the laws of God any more than you can, but it can interpret them according to what it wants, just as you can. That is why the question, "What do you want?" must be answered. You are answering it every minute and every second. And each moment of decision is a judgment that is anything but ineffectual. Its effects will follow automatically until the decision is changed. Remember, though, that the alternatives themselves are unalterable. The Holy Spirit, like the ego, is a decision. Together, they constitute all the alternatives the mind can accept and obey. The Holy Spirit and the ego are the only choices open to you. God created one, and so you cannot eradicate it. You made the other, and so you can. Only what God creates is irreversible and unchangeable. What you made can always be changed, because when you do not think like God, you are not really thinking at all. Delusional ideas are not real thoughts, although you can believe in them. But you are wrong. The function of thought comes from God and is in God. As part of her thought, you cannot think apart from her. Irrational thought is disordered thought. God herself orders your thought because your thought was created by her. Guilt feelings are always a sign that you do not know this. They also show that you believe you can think apart from God and want to. Every disordered thought is attended by guilt at its inception and maintained by guilt in its continuance. Guilt is inescapable by those who believe they order their own thoughts and must therefore obey their dictates. This makes them feel responsible for their errors without recognizing that by accepting this responsibility, they are reacting irresponsibly. If the sole responsibility of the miracle worker is to accept the atonement for herself, and I assure you that it is, then the responsibility for what is atoned for cannot be yours. The dilemma cannot be resolved except by accepting the solution of undoing. You would be responsible for the effects of all your wrong thinking if it could not be undone. The purpose of the atonement is to save the past in purified form only. If you accept the remedy for disordered thought, a remedy whose efficacy is beyond doubt, how can its symptoms remain? The continuing decision to remain separated is the only possible reason for continuing guilt feelings. We have said this before, but did not emphasize the destructive results of the decision. Any decision of the mind will affect both behavior and experience. What you want, you expect. This is not delusional. Your mind does make your future, and it will turn it back to full creation at any minute if it accepts the atonement first. It will also return to full creation the instant it has done so. Having given up its disordered thought, the proper ordering of thought becomes quite apparent. This section is long and contains a lot of ideas that are, quite frankly, alien to my thinking, and I expect to most who encounter A Course in Miracles. Firstly, A Course in Miracles makes a very definite distinction between the word create and the word make. I have some thoughts about this. So, A Course in Miracles also speaks of the natural state of God and of us all, the one child of God, as being abstract, and that all form has no meaning. This doesn't feel good to think about at all, much less to accept as the only real truth, because I speak for myself here when I say I am fairly addicted to form. It is my understanding that creation speaks of things that are only love. There's nothing in them that is not love, and they are uniform. So it's an abstract concept. Perhaps think of it as a vibration. And then everything that is made contains not love in it. And so this introduces the idea that the only real thoughts are thoughts that are only love. And so when we think anything that has not love in it, it's not even a real thought. That also doesn't feel good to hear or think about, much less accept as the only real truth. But it does harken back to the first lessons that have us say to ourselves that the thoughts we're experiencing don't mean anything, because none of our thoughts are purely only love. And what we are being asked to do is to train ourselves to let go of our attachment to anything that contains not love, being told that it's not real. Again, these thoughts are very different and very alien to our default way of thinking. And at least for me, they are uncomfortable. But I also recognize the freedom that lies in them. And that's what I find so compelling about A Course in Miracles. Okay, lesson 37. My holiness blesses the world. This idea contains the first glimmerings of your true function in the world, or why you are here. Your purpose is to see the world through your own holiness. Thus are you and the world blessed together. No one loses. Nothing is taken away from anyone. Everyone gains through your holy vision. It signifies the end of sacrifice because it offers everyone her full due. And she is entitled to everything because it is her birthright as a child of God. There is no other way in which the idea of sacrifice can be removed from the world's thinking. Any other way of seeing will inevitably demand payment of someone or something. As a result, the perceiver will lose, nor will she have any idea why she is losing. Yet is her wholeness restored to her awareness through your vision. Your holiness blesses her by asking nothing of her. Those who see themselves as whole make no demands. Your holiness is the salvation of the world. It lets you teach the world that it is one with you, not by preaching to it, not by telling it anything, but merely by your quiet recognition that in your holiness are all things blessed along with you. Today's 4 longer exercise periods, each to involve 3 to 5 minutes of practice, begin with the repetition of the idea for today, followed by a minute or so of looking about you as you apply the idea to whatever you see. My holiness blesses this chair. My holiness blesses that window. My holiness blesses this body. Then close your eyes and apply the idea to any person who occurs to you, using her name and saying, My holiness blesses you, name. You may continue the practice period with your eyes closed. You may open your eyes again and apply the idea for today to your outer world if you so desire. You may alternate between applying the idea to what you see around you and to those who are in your thoughts. Or you may use any combination of these 2 phrases of application that you prefer. The practice period should conclude with a repetition of the idea with your eyes closed and another immediately following with your eyes open. The shorter exercises consist of repeating the idea as often as you can. It is particularly helpful to apply it silently to anyone you meet, using her name as you do so. It is essential to the idea if anyone seems to cause an adverse reaction in you. Offer her the blessing of your holiness immediately, that you may learn to keep it in your own awareness. And again, the idea for today, my holiness blesses the world. If we are only love, we would bless everything that we think of, everything that we encounter. And in A Course in Miracles, where it reminds us frequently that our thoughts are the most real things in the world that we made up, thinking of someone is the most real encounter there is. And so, again, we are asked to take responsibility for every thought that comes into our mind. And as we were reminded in the previous reading, any thought that is not purely love isn't even real. And so we are asked to let go of it, to see it as meaningless, basically. Yeah, very different thinking. Oh, and one additional thought that I had as I was doing the reading, it introduces the idea that in the atonement that brings us back to a heavenly state, or the remembrance of the heavenly state that we never left, in reality, it talks about how our past is purified and refined so that only the love in it is what remains. So if you could think upon your past and imagine it with only the love in it remaining, everything else dissolving, and all of its consequences, all of the things that we are afraid of happening because of a mistake we made, something that we regret, imagine all of that dissolving and having no consequence on anyone else. Everything healed, perfect and whole, and only the love in it remaining. And our past will be all the more rich if every present moment is full to the brim with love. And then if our past is a bucket that we're filling, and if love is the only thing that's real, we're filling it with love if each of our present moments is full of love. And so we are being trained and invited to be more in tune with love in the present moment so that we are more in touch with the process of creating. Because I believe that that's what creation is. It's when we feel love. That love is our child in essence, our creation. All right, I leave those thoughts with you. Lots to ponder here. Until next time, bye-bye.